This is Coach Carolyn Peck, and you are listening to This is Purdue.
This is Stephanie White, and you're listening to This is Purdue.
This is Ukari Figs, and you're listening to This is Purdue.
Hi, I'm Kate Young, and you're listening to This is Purdue, the official podcast for Purdue University. As a Purdue alum and Indiana native, I know firsthand about the family of students and professors who are in it together, persistently pursuing and relentlessly rethinking. Who are the next game changers, difference makers, ceiling breakers, innovators? Who are these Boilermakers? Join me as we feature students, faculty, and alumni taking small steps toward their giant leaps and inspiring others to do the same.
Ladies and gentlemen, the national champion team resides in West Lafayette, Indiana. As Katie Douglas throws the ball skyward, it's over. Purdue wins 62-45, capturing the national championship.
Well, you want the real story?
Hi, this is Purdue listeners. I'm so glad you all joined us because in this episode, we are celebrating. What are we celebrating? Well, that audio at the beginning of this episode gave you a big hint. This March Madness, we're reflecting on the 25th anniversary of the legendary 1998-1999 Purdue women's basketball team championship win. This team had a 34-1 record, and this team became the first and only Big Ten Conference women's team to win an NCAA National Championship. So, to help us celebrate, we're talking to several members of this iconic team, former head coach Carolyn Peck and co-captains Stephanie White and Ukari Figs. These three women share more about this historic season and the real story behind what happened once they got to San Jose, California for the Final Four. This season kicked off with this Boilermaker team beating number 1 ranked and 3-time defending national champion Tennessee 78-68 in Mackey Arena. This game ended the Lady Vols' 46-game winning streak, by the way. Here's Coach Peck after that massive win.
Y'all, I cannot tell you how proud I am of you. 40 minutes. Let me tell you, hard and intense, like you're on. Yeah! And you hang tough together. They'd make their runs, and you showed no sign of fear. You ain't afraid of nothing. You step out on the floor ready to play every day, just like that.
This Boilermaker team was also the first women's basketball team to sell out Mackey. And at the end of the season, on March 28th, 1999, this was the team that hoisted the championship trophy up and cut down the net after beating Duke 62-45. The friendship, commitment, and determination that led this legendary women's team to a national championship will forever be celebrated in our Purdue community. And in this special episode of This is Purdue, you'll hear the heart-wrenching, jaw-dropping, and emotional behind-the-scenes stories from 3 of the women who were there for it all. Let's go. Thank you all for joining us. We are so excited to celebrate the 1998-1999 Women's Championship, NCAA Championship team. Let's kick it off with how you all felt coming into that season. The previous season, you had won that 1998 Big Ten tournament. You got to the Elite Eight. Did you all know this was a really special team going into that year as the season kicked off?
You know how long that was? You want us to remember that far back?
I feel like it was a special time in your life, so you should remember it, right?
I remember it like it was yesterday because I had expected to take a job to go to the Orlando Miracle, and I believe Steph and Kari were at USA Basketball. So I had to call you guys over the phone. I talked to Kari first, and Kari says to me, well, every year I've had a new head coach, and every time we get a new head coach, we go a step further. That kind of pissed me off. I'm like, well, I'm not going to turn this team over to somebody else. And then I called Steph, and Steph was angry. If there was anybody that knew we had what it took to win a national championship, it was Steph. And Steph is like, she used some choice language that she was very adult.
I did. I might not be proud of.
Hey, but the message was delivered. And she was like, we can get it done. You can't leave us. So, I mean, after talking to these two, then I knew we had something really special.
Yeah. And Stephanie and Ukari, how do you feel knowing that you kind of like rewrote history in a way by keeping Coach Peck as the head coach for the Purdue women's team?
I felt relieved. The backstory, Ukari and I had played for 3 coaches in 3 years. And there had been a lot of turmoil after our freshman year. We had returned, I think, 3 scholarship players, a couple of incoming freshmen that decided to still come. And so it was at that time, like Coach Peck said, it's like we were this close after having gone through everything that we went through. And so for me, and Kari said it a little bit more tactfully than I did, but for me, it was more just like, gosh, dang, like we've been going through so much adversity. Now we have this opportunity right in front of us. We don't want to have to start over. And so I was relieved when Carolyn was able to stay. I think that we knew we had what it took. And we felt like we had such a unique bond with that team and staff and community, quite honestly. And we didn't want to let it go. I didn't anyway.
Well, and let me tell you, I knew that after the decision was made, I was going to stay. We had a European trip scheduled. Now, I don't know if Steph knows this, but I know that she's a planner. And she had an itinerary for everything that she was going to do once we landed in France. And so I made it a mission that everywhere she went, I was going, because I knew I was going to get a great education of the history, but then to rebond our connection after knowing that I was going to leave.
I think for me, just going back to that Elite 8 game and losing to La Tech, I think we were devastated for one, and then two, just knowing that we, like Steph said, after everything we had gone through in the past, that we had actually everybody from that team back. We thought we had the coaching staff back. And then when Coach made that call, it was like, really? Like, what's going on? And I thought it was pretty funny what I said, but I don't think she thought that was funny at the time. But, you know, for me, I'm just like, well, all right, we've been through it before. We'll go further this time. And I think, you know, for Steph and I guess I would say I can't speak for her, but after all the years we've been together, I can probably speak for her in saying that, you know, it really did build a lot of the toughness into us and helped us as leaders, all the adversity we had gone through. So for the situation that happened with Coach Peck, you know, after Steph and I actually got a chance to talk about it, we're like, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't let this happen. And, you know, we wanted to at least let our voice be heard and saying, hey, we're the ones who stayed through all of this. We don't want to go through another coaching change. We've got what it takes right now. We came here to win a national championship. We know we can win it with this team and this coaching staff, regardless of whether, you know, Coach Peck is here next year or not. And I think we were able to show people that we had the right choice in mind.
It was important to our podcast team to interview these 3 women together. And the camaraderie, love, and respect I witnessed in this interview was truly incredible. And I'm sure you as a listener can already pick up on this as well. Coach Peck, Stephanie, and Ukari have a true lifelong bond. So to give some additional background on Stephanie and Ukari, going into their freshman year at Purdue, Stephanie was the reigning Indiana Miss Basketball, and Ukari was the reigning Kentucky Miss Basketball. And both were recruited by a number of universities aside from Purdue. For Stephanie, she says she always dreamed of going to Purdue. She shares more about her Purdue journey.
Well, I grew up about 45 minutes away from Purdue, and really all of my childhood was spent going to Purdue sports. And oftentimes it was volleyball matches. My aunt was a volleyball season ticket holder. She worked at Purdue. I traveled around sometimes to watch the volleyball play at different Big Ten arenas, and of course, watched Purdue basketball as well. And so Purdue had always been a place that I had thought about and dreamed of going. And then other opportunities came about. So then it became, okay, well, you're being recruited by all these different places. So you do have more than one option. You know, at the end of the day, I originally majored in aviation. I studied aviation for 2 years. And so Purdue was the only place I could do that as a major. So that added to, you know, when Ukari and I came to college, there was no WNBA. There wasn't an opportunity really to play basketball beyond college unless we were willing to go overseas. And neither one of us at that time, that really wasn't an option for us. So the education portion of it was important. And for me, I consider myself a community project. I grew up in a small town. Everybody in our community has really been a part of my journey since I started kindergarten. So for them to be able to continue to watch me play and come to our games and be a part of it was really important. And Ukari will probably talk about this too. But, one of the things when we were both deciding if we were going to come to Purdue or not was like, you guys can't play together. You guys play the same position. You can't play together. Why would you both want to go there? And, that was the extent of the negative recruiting back in the day. It's much different now, but, it was like, you can't play together. And if you know anything about us, we're both pretty stubborn too. And so it was like, you don't think we can play together? All right, watch what we can do together. That was an added benefit. Ukari committed before I did. So for me, it was an added bonus to be able to play with her.
Here's Ukari on her Purdue journey.
I knew probably in middle school that I wanted to do engineering. As the colleges started kind of letters and things like that started coming in during high school, I kind of separated them by who had an engineering program and who didn't. And the places that I kind of narrowed it down to were probably, I think, the same four schools maybe that Steph had narrowed down to as well, that all had really good engineering programs, but also their basketball programs were highly touted as well. And so, as Steph mentioned, it was kind of one of those things where everybody for me that was recruiting me outside of Purdue was saying, oh, Steph's from Indiana. She's going to be Miss Indiana basketball. You don't want to go there. You're not going to get to play. She's going to get all the publicity, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I'm not playing basketball to get publicity. I'm playing to win. Like, why wouldn't I want to play with one of the best players in the country? Like, it didn't make sense to me. But once I got to actually meet Steph, I think maybe it was my junior year or 1 year, I went to Purdue's basketball camp. So it was me, Steph, and Monica Maxwell at camp, and we were all talking about who was recruiting us and where we thought we might go, et cetera. We didn't do a good job, obviously, of getting Monica to come to Purdue. But anyway, Steph and I, we all wanted to win a national championship. We wanted to be able to compete for championships. And I think for me, the combination of having, one of the top engineering schools in the country, as well as knowing that I could do it close to home where my family, I'm 3.5, 4 hours from home. And my family, kind of like Steph, had been at every game. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, great aunts and uncles, everybody. And so for me, it was really important. So at the time, the Big Ten Network was like a great way for people to be able to see the away games, which honestly, you look at like Stanford or somewhere out on the West Coast, we couldn't get those channels in Kentucky, or at least you couldn't get them without having cable, which in the area I was in was not possible. So anyway, it was a really big thing for me once, I got on campus. I think we took our official visit to Purdue together and kind of getting to know Steph more and kind of seeing the team, et cetera. So, yeah, it ended up working out well, both from the engineering standpoint and obviously from basketball.
For this dynamic duo, their bond goes back even further to before their time as teammates at Purdue. So your history goes back even, to high school. That's incredible.
Yeah, high school. And then actually when we got Miss Basketball, during that time, you could still play AAU. So we were still under 18. So we actually got Miss Basketball in Indiana and Kentucky and played AAU together that summer. So with Monica, with Mackenzie Curlis, and won the AAU championship that year. So we got our first championship together in AAU, which was, I think, a even better experience because we got to play more together and kind of just get a better feel before we even got to Purdue.
And you can probably tell we're very much aligned in our viewpoints of things, and I think that for us, we were linearly focused on academics and being the best that we could be, and helping Purdue be the best that we could be. And it didn't matter how it happened. That's what we wanted to accomplish. And so for us to be able to know that, I think from the beginning, and have a strong foundation of just beliefs and core values, it allowed us to very quickly, I think, step onto the floor, be great teammates, and be leaders for our team. Because it wasn't about us. It was about what can we accomplish? Can we accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish together at Purdue? It was a windy road with a lot of peaks and valleys, but ultimately we were able to do that. And that was our goal outside of getting our degrees when we stepped foot on campus together.
So fast forward to their senior year at Purdue, Stephanie and Ukari earned the titles of co-captains during the 1998-1999 season. They reflect back on leading this championship-winning team 25 years ago. Here's Ukari.
I think as leaders, Steph and I obviously have different communication methods, and our personalities are similar, but also they're probably kind of complementary of each other in that I'm probably the more fiery, things are black and white, very direct, and don't really sugarcoat a lot of things for people. But at the same time, I had a connection with maybe some of the team that Steph maybe had a connection with other members of the team. So we complemented each other well, and we're really co-captains, right? There were games when I was struggling, right? And Steph would pick me up or come be the person, to help me. And the same thing, for Steph, if one of us were struggling, the other one picked each other up. And I think it worked well, both for us and also for our team.
I think the other thing is that after what Ukari and I had been through and throughout the course of our 3 years up until that point, we had a different sense of urgency. While some people would probably call us a little bit overbearing, we also knew that there's a small window, and that for us in particular, being that we were going to be seniors, the window was closing. We didn't want any distractions. We didn't want anything to take away from the opportunity because it had been such a struggle for us to get to where we were. And we had gone through that together. And, Ukari and I had been bonded as soon as we got to Purdue, but going through all of the things that we had gone through, it just made our bond even tighter. And so we were very aligned, very supportive of one another. And as Ukari mentioned, complimentary of one another in the way that we did things. And we had a really good group that if they fell out of line in our mind, then we nipped it in the bud. We brought them together and we helped them understand. And I think they did understand that this might be a once in a lifetime opportunity for us.
Throughout the season, this team hit a number of milestones. One of those was a sellout at Mackey Arena, the first Purdue women's basketball team to do so. The team defeated Ohio State 88-58 in front of a crowd of 14,123 fans. Coach Peck, Stephanie, and Ukari reflect on this game, and you'll hear why this particular Big Ten matchup was an incredibly emotional one for this close-knit team.
What was that feeling like? How did you all find out? Take us back to that game.
I don't know how we found out because, there was no social media. We didn't know. We didn't find out on social media. I just remember running through the tunnel, and as soon as we stepped onto the floor, hearing the crowd erupt and looking up. I think that was one of the few times I'd ever gotten really emotional before a game. I had tears in my eyes because it was a special day. We had a special team. Our community really rallied behind us and were with us. And, it just was a really indescribable feeling, a sense of pride that up until that point, I'm not sure that I had felt, that it just really did overcome me with emotion.
It was an emotional week for me just because it was a week my grandmother had passed away, and we had a really tough game at Penn State that Friday. And honestly, with it being senior night, I was already emotional or a little bit just, I guess, maybe overwhelmed just from, like Steph said, just everything we had gone through, what we knew we came to Purdue to do, and to walk out of the tunnel and see, all those fans. And then for me personally, a lot of people from my church, from my family, from my community came up from Kentucky to support me. And it was a pretty awesome ordeal. And actually, I'm friends with one of the players on Ohio State's team. And I really honestly don't think they thought they had a chance before the game. But, when you looked at that crowd, it was like, they don't even have a chance here, because we were really pumped up. And I think everybody came out with a great energy, and, the Purdue fans are amazing. And it was awesome, send out for senior night, I think, to have that sold out.
I thought that these two, Steph and Kari, deserved that. And I was really happy that the state of Indiana and Kentucky really showed up for that game to really show their appreciation for what these two have been through and what they were. And it was kind of a send-off too into the Big Ten tournament, into the NCAA tournament. And so I felt like Steph and Kari deserved that. So I can't even tell you how appreciative I was to see how that fan support rallied around these two.
As the season progressed, this Boilermaker women's basketball team went 16-0 during Big Ten play and won both the Big Ten regular season and conference tournament championships. As March Madness approached, the team secured the number 1 seed, along with UConn, Tennessee, and Louisiana Tech. Purdue beat Oral Roberts, Kansas, North Carolina, and Rutgers in the March Madness tournament until they secured their spot in the Final Four. Coach Peck kicks it off for us with the real story behind this team's championship run, the details that even our most diehard Boilermaker athletics fans may not know.
Talk us through that trip to the Final Four and ultimately, winning the whole thing. Like, how does it feel now, 25 years later, but also reflecting back? Can you remember like the nerves, the excitement?
Well, you want the real story.
Yes, we do.
This is a team that felt like we had been disrespected all season long, even though we started the season off by knocking off Tennessee. There was always the talk of Tennessee and Connecticut. Then when we get to San Jose, Tennessee and Connecticut aren't there. We're not in the best hotel. We had to call our band who was on their way to San Francisco to go sightseeing to bring the bus back so we could go to practice. I mean, it was just like, what else could go wrong? But it never the team from staying focused on the mission of what we were there to do. I mean, we couldn't even get the brand new gear. Y'all remember we practiced, and back in those days, you threw the practice gear in the dryer, so some of our numbers were peeled off. The other 3 teams are out there in shiny new gear, and we're out there kind of like the Bad News Bears, but yes. It was a focus that this team had. And I really felt like if we could get past Louisiana Tech, we had a really good chance of winning a national championship. Now, we had a motivating factor from the previous year. It was Louisiana Tech who had knocked us off. But they had a phenomenal team, and rebounding was their strength, the athleticism. Monica, what was Monica's last name?
Maxwell.
Monica Maxwell I swear that woman had wings. I mean, she could fly. So we remember the practices leading up to that. Those were freaking football practices. And I told you guys, if you can't get a butt on somebody, just chest bump them. Just go straight ahead, but keep them off the glass. And it was a war. It was a battle.
It was. I don't remember a lot of the details between, the end of the season and into the tournament. I just remember being very locked in and laser focused. I think our regional was at Illinois State. And we had 2 really good teams that we had to get past in the regional, North Carolina and Rutgers. And they were very good. And I remember feeling a little bit relieved when we won and we were going to the Final Four. It was like emotion. This is what we'd worked towards. It's finally here. Go up to cut down the net. I'm so excited. I get down off of the ladder afterwards and I'm like, okay, this isn't what you want, right? Like I had to remind myself because I was just so happy and so excited and felt so relieved that we had finally gotten to that point, and then had to really remind myself and bring myself back to being locked in on, this isn't enough. We want the national championship. Obviously, we weren't privy to a lot of the logistical stuff. I know we were disappointed in our hotel. I know we were on that rackety bus. But at the same time, it was like, okay, well, we didn't know any different, right? We didn't know any different. We were just going to go. We were going to play, and we were going to do the best that we could, and we were going to fight for a national championship.
The game against Rutgers was probably the game for me just because, again, we had come here to win the national championship. We had gotten to the Elite Eight before and just not wanting to kind of mess it up, right? We knew we had the team. We had what we needed. Both those games were tough games, but the Rutgers game was definitely a physical game. They had a really strong team and obviously a Hall of Fame coach that we were coaching going up against. But I remember the end of that game once we knew we were going to win and kind of looking over at Steph and, just thinking that this is what we came here for, even though we went through a lot. It wasn't really the path that we would have imagined when we came, but this was what it was. And then, to her point, I don't honestly remember the bus. I don't remember the hotel, anything other than, you're going to talk about later, maybe the exam that I knew I had to take in the middle of the Final Four. But I was trying to just enjoy being there because we had worked so hard, and it was like, okay, now we're here. But to Steph's point, it's like you don't want to be excited or be okay with just being here. We want to win it. We want to come out here and win it. So I think it was a really motivating thing for me just to know we've come this far. Let's not mess it up.
So they did it. They were the national champions. And the accolades didn't stop there. Ukari was named the 1999 NCAA Tournament Most Outstanding Player. Stephanie was named Big Ten Female Athlete of the Year, Big Ten Player of the Year, the Margaret Wade Trophy recipient, and the Honda Award winner. And Coach Peck was named National Coach of the Year and Big Ten Coach of the Year. So I was curious, how does one celebrate after winning a national championship? Well, for Coach Peck, at first, it wasn't exactly the celebration she had in mind.
After that game, I come back to my suite and one of our managers comes to the door to tell me that we're going to fly back. And then she said, we're going to leave in 2 hours. And I said, to go where? And they said, wait, we got to get back to West Lafayette. The girls got to go to class. And I'm thinking, class? We just won the national championship.
Okay, so I see where Coach was coming from. But hey, even as national champions, these young women had to get back to class. It's all about the balance. Coach Peck details a more exciting celebration that came once they landed in Indiana and made their way back to campus.
So they were like, no, we've got to fly back to West Lafayette. Well, then the fog set in. So we had to fly into Indianapolis until the fog cleared. And then when we got back, the fans, some of them, were still there. But then we got to come back and in Mackey and going through the athlete line. They had arranged a line of all of the athletes. And I believe the last hand that I slapped a high five before I went on the stage, that was freaking Drew Brees. And, it was so exciting because the football team, hell, they tackled my girls after we beat Tennessee. Like they followed this team. They were at the game. They were so supportive.
Here's Purdue's beloved former vice president and director of athletics, Morgan Burke, and Coach Peck herself at the team's official championship celebration and ceremony.
You'll hear a lot of accolades this evening about these young women. Not only are they great students, great athletes, but they've been tremendous role models for this entire community. And this championship reinforces that not only can we compete against the best, we can beat the best.
Focus, focus, focus. That's what the head coach preached all season long, and the results are pretty apparent. In addition to receiving virtually every individual national coaching award, she's got the ultimate reward here. She is surrounded by the 1999 national champions. Here's head coach Carolyn Peck.
Now, this has been a year of firsts. We'll start with the first team to end Tennessee's winning streak. Against Indiana, Stephanie White-McCarty got Purdue's first triple-double for the women's basketball. This team went undefeated in the Big Ten to be number one, first. They beat all three teams that we played in the Big Ten tournament, so we were first. I forgot one. We had our first sellout for a women's basketball game.
Since 1999, there have been multiple reunions and celebrations for this iconic team. Coach Peck shares more.
To see what Mackey had done, but I'm going to tell you the true celebration was the 10-year celebration when Sharon Versett brought us all back. I mean, that was the first time as adults we could really celebrate that championship. That's where I felt like the true celebration really started.
And here's Ukari.
Definitely the 10-year with everybody there and being able to, like you said, kind of be that first time we were able to celebrate and all come back together. But we had the celebration in Mackey, and unfortunately, Steph and Coach Peck weren't able to be there. But we did FaceTime them. We called them and made sure they were a part of some of the celebration. But it was really good to get to see some of the team and Amy Schaefer and Danielle Bird, two of the players who walked on during our sophomore year, in order for us to just have enough people to have a team, right? And so their sacrifice, and people look at Steph and I as being the captains and being the leaders, but we had a lot of other people that sacrificed and did a lot for the team to even be able to compete for a national championship. But so it was really cool to get to see them, their families, and Mackenzie Curlis came back, which Mackenzie was one of the members on that team from sophomore year as well, and lives out in Wyoming, so we don't get to see her as much. So it was really cool to get to see everybody. And, you know, I really didn't realize how close this team was until I went to the WNBA, and I would talk to Steph, or we would talk to other people about their experience in college, and we're like, you guys didn't go to the movie, you know, guys didn't hang out together, or you didn't go eat together or whatever, you know. But every time we played, or we played against one of our teammates, we always wanted to get together, or the coaches when Coach Peck was there. And so it's one of those things where you don't really realize how tight that connection is, because we just experience it and we're a part of it. But it's a really unique thing, I think. And even the Purdue staff and team members now are like, you all haven't seen each other in, 15 years or 20 years. And it's just like you pick right back up.
I think the older we get too, the more we can appreciate that, because we've had different experiences, whether it be with different teams or, different jobs and, all of these different situations. And for us, we're talking to all of these young people now and continuing to realize that very few get to have the experience that we had collegiately with a team. And so it reminds us that it really was the journey, right? It really was the journey. It really was the memories. It really was all of those things that sound very cliche. And so to think about celebrating this championship, yes, the trophy's awesome. And yes, winning the national championship and continuing to be the only Big Ten team to do it, and seeing the banner, all that is awesome. But when we get together, we ain't talking about that, right? Like, we're talking about the practices, and we're talking about, the experiences and the moments and all of those things. And they are still very, very fresh because we are still family. And now we're talking about our kids and, all of these things too. So it really does remind us how very, very fortunate that we were.
So out of all the milestones and firsts and triumphs, what were these three women's favorite memories from that historic 1998-1999 season? Here's Ukari.
I would say for me, it's definitely the Penn State game at Penn State. I think, and I'll try not to break down, but my grandmother had passed away that week unexpectedly, and the game was a tough game. Well, it was tough for me actually even to get to the game because of the weather and the flight getting canceled and having to take a taxi or whatever over to Penn State from Pittsburgh. And then knowing that Steph was sick and she was trying to still play. And it was a lot going on before the game. But then even towards the end of the game, I remember telling Katie, I'm like, Katie, if you don't ever hit another shot, hit this shot. We drew up a play for Katie to go left, and of course they let her go left and she makes the shot. But I just remember the team kind of congratulating each other, but really I just felt that love and that support, because like you can tell and just people know from our team that we're a family, not just a team. And for everybody to kind of embrace me, I think most of the time it's like people are thinking we're celebrating the win, but I think that team was kind of just huddled up around each other and just helping support. And I'll never forget that because it was a tough week for me.
Here's Stephanie's standout memory from that season.
Certainly beating Tennessee to start the year. That was one. We were using that game as a measuring stick of where we were and where we wanted to go. Losing the way that we did at Stanford that was another one, just disappointing, but also I think reframed a narrative for us and how sharp we have to be all the time. That Penn State game that Ukari mentioned, I mean, this getting her there, pre-cell phone, it was logistically just, and the fact that she could have been anywhere but there, being with her family and grieving with her family. And she went through all of that to be with us and to play that game. And we didn't want to let her down. You know, we wanted to lift her up and we wanted to have her back and we wanted to do it for her. I mean, it was a heavy game for all of us. And I think that being there for her and supporting her was our priority, you know, and thankfully Katie was able to deliver, you know, and then you come to that last game in Ohio State, you know, and the sold out crowd and just the emotions of senior day and what we'd been through and where we were. I remember nothing about the Big Ten tournament and beating Rutgers and then, you know, hoisting the trophy and flying home on a red eye. That's what I remember.
With a broken ankle.
With a broken ankle.
And I'll mention one thing because Steph, when she said they wanted to have my back at Penn State, Steph thought, you know, a lot of people don't see the energy or the passion that Steph has all the time. She kind of plays, you know, kind of like I did a lot, like just you play, you don't have a lot of emotion. But before the game, I went out to shoot. We were out shooting and somebody was heckling me and, you know, just Figs, you're terrible. You can't shoot. You know, it's just saying crazy stuff. And I was trying to tune it out, but it was honestly getting to me. But Steph came out and was pissed off. I don't remember if she said something to the girl or went and told their coaches, like, you better tell this girl to be quiet because Kari's got enough going on than to deal with the heckling fan. But, you know, just for me, again, the sisterhood, the friendship, the concern about me when she's actually the one that has a fever, you know, trying to play through or figure out how to play with that fever. And so anyway, that's the kind of team and the kind of bond we have and why 25 years later, I'm in her house right now, right? So.
And finally, Coach Peck reflects on her favorite memories.
I would say for me, there were bookends. So you start with that Tennessee game, and I can remember Steph hitting a and one and come marching out of the huddle of people. And I don't know what she was saying, but she was ready to go.
Bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah.
Switch words again.
To all the way to Tennessee's final timeout that Pat Summitt had. And everybody comes to the bench. They're jumping up and down. Everybody's excited. And Steph's grabbing her teammates, telling them not to celebrate because we're supposed to be here. And so that kind of started and led to what you saw this team to be able to be. Then you get to that national championship game. Katie Douglas was emotional before the game. I got into the locker room. Katie's crying. Tiffany's crying. Camille is crying. And so I go to Tiff first and I go, Tiff, why are you crying? And she said, well, because Camille's crying. And I said, Camille, why are you crying? And she said, well, Katie was crying. Well, Katie was extremely emotional because she had lost her father before her freshman year at Purdue. And they felt that for each other. Then at halftime, we're down. So I go into the coach's locker room. We have our little meeting and, you know, everybody had suggestions of X's and O's. And I was like, that's not the answer. So I came out and in front of them, and Steph and Kari sat right in the middle because they were my captains. And I said, y'all, we're exactly where we want to be. And these two looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. I said, do you remember the Elite Eight last year? I said, we were ahead of Louisiana Tech. They came back and took it from us, and we're getting ready to do that to Duke. And it was against Steph. We got to check your little soap in your mouth because she stood up and dropped a bomb and was like, blank, yeah. And the rest of the team, with how much they believed in these two and the leadership that they could bring, that second half, they went out and took over. And then vividly, I remember when Steph went down and we relied a lot on Steph, and Kari had a phenomenal tournament, but it was like, can they do it with just one of them? And when Steph was down, Kari went over and put her arm around Steph, and I could tell she was telling her, we're going to do this for you. I get emotional thinking about it. but they just took over. I mean, I can see flashbacks of the camera going over to Steph, and Tiffany Young is holding her hand as tight as possible. But that group bonded together to complete the mission, and they did it for each other. And with the clock running down, who else but Katie Douglas has the basketball in her hands? And I remember looking down and I'm going, the Bad News Bears, we got it done. And let me tell you, this team taught me that you don't have to be older to teach lessons. You can learn from young people. I don't even know if there's a word to describe how tight this team was and the commitment that they had, not only to wanting to commit to winning a national championship, but what they had for each other, the pride that they had in each other and that program. It's something that, you wish that everybody in their lifetime could experience, but not everybody gets to. That's why I love this group, because I learned so much from them of what sacrificing meant, what commitment meant, what determination meant. They showed that to me throughout that whole entire season.
Oh, and I remember I want to remember on that game that Ukari steal of Nicole Erickson, who had been a player that was at Purdue and left and transferred to Duke.
Yep.
And then Kelly making the big free throws. A freshman coming in that moment and making the big free throws. I mean, there are a lot of specific plays from either one of those games at the Final Four. I remember Ukari had just an outstanding Final Four national championship, but those two plays in particular, at a critical moment, Ukari gets that steal from Erickson, which I thought was very poetic, and Kelly knocking down those big free throws in a critical moment. And to Carolyn's point, we just had the ultimate trust and belief in one another.
So some of these memories are emotional, some are celebratory, but overall, these stories reflect just how close this team really was, as Coach Peck just alluded to. And before we move on, Ukari did share one last behind-the-scenes Final Four story with me.
I had heat and mass transfer, and when we were going through, every time during the NCAA tournament, I would look at the syllabus for each class and kind of see what projects or tests I had so that I could plan accordingly and try to, either study or get stuff done before a big tournament or whatever. And so I knew if we made it to the Final Four, that I was going to have to take this exam. So I talked to Sue and she's like, hey, just keep studying for it. But, if you get to the point where you get to the Final Four, you're going to either have to ask your professor if you can take it early, or you'll have to take it with you and somebody will have to proctor it for you during the Final Four. And I'm like, okay. So we get there and I contact my professor, or I let him know in advance, like, hey, if we get this far, I'm going to need to either take the exam early or whatever. And so we got to the point, I talked to him and I said, hey, can I go ahead and take the exam before I go? I'd really like to be able to focus, for one, on the exam, and then two, be able to have my focus on the Final Four. And he was like, nope, absolutely not. You're going to take it at the same time as everybody else. You can't take it early, and I'm thinking, I don't know, honestly, what his thought process was, because at the time, I'm telling my age, but there were no cell phones. There wasn't, really any way for me to take the answers and give it to anybody else or whatever. So anyway, he didn't agree to that. Then I had to decide, did I want to take it before the first game or after the first game? In my mind, I'm thinking, if I take this thing before the first game, I'm not going to be able to focus on the game or the exam. I decided to play in the first game and then take it after we won, hopefully, that first game. And so I ended up won that first game and then studied like crazy, took the exam. And then I still say the reason I went 0 for 8 in the first half was I was still thinking about that heat and mass transfer exam. So that's my excuse for why I played so bad in the first half of the Duke game. So,
hey, I do not blame you. I'd still be like, what did I answer? Oh, that's great.
I didn't even know that story until we did the documentary with the Big Ten Network. I had no idea that Ukari had to take an exam when we were at the Final Four. Like, we're living our best life at the Final Four, and we're playing basketball, and we're signing autographs, and we're doing all that stuff. And she's having to, I don't even know what heat and mass transfer is. And she's having to take an exam about it. So didn't know that at all. And so a whole new level of respect came after we found that out.
Well, what a testament to her, too, that you're not sitting there complaining like, oh, I have to take this exam. I can't believe it.
Oh, yeah. No idea.
While we're on the topic of this, how did Ukari and Stephanie balance Purdue's rigorous academics with being the best college basketball team in the entire nation?
I would say for me, a lot of it was, it was, for one, the coaches, the support from the coaches. Even before I got to Purdue, Cindy Lamping and Shannon Lindsay were two of the players that were already doing mechanical engineering and chemical engineering and playing significant minutes for the team. And so for me, I knew if they've got two people doing it now, if I work hard, I can do it too. But knowing that the coaches would allow the flexibility in the schedule around, labs and things like that, and trying to work through that situation was beneficial. And then also for Purdue with the academic center at the time, Sue Ofterhod was our academic advisor, I guess. And she was the one that honestly probably single-handedly gave me the confidence to do it, because there was an advisor I remember on campus that when I told them initially as a freshman that I wanted to do basketball and mechanical engineering, he kind of came back and said, well, that's going to be really hard for you to do both. And I said, I understand that, but that's what I want to do. Sue, when I went to Sue and I'm like, hey, am I crazy for thinking I can do this? And she's like, absolutely not. You can do it. Shannon and Cindy did it. We can set your schedules up. We'll have to plan accordingly for your spring semester and your fall semester, and even, take some of these harder classes or tougher labs during the summer. You can stay here during the summer. And so, she gave me that confidence and also helped me throughout that ordeal.
Here's Stephanie on how she handled the balance between academics and athletics during her time at Purdue.
I do think we had an advantage then because there weren't as many distractions. There's so many distractions now, and there wasn't the cell phone, there wasn't social media. We weren't reading the paper unless we went and bought one, and we didn't have money to do that because there was no NIL. There weren't as many distractions. And as I mentioned before, we're pretty linearly focused. So we managed our time well. We spent time doing what we were supposed to do. College was a means to an end for us. Like, we wanted to get our degree. We wanted to win a championship. And then we were going into the next step of our lives. Not everybody felt that way, but that's just who we were. And so for us, it was more along the lines of, okay, let's make sure that we do as much as we can ahead of time so that no matter where we are, we can be all there. So we can completely focus, when we're at practice, and we can completely focus when we're in school, and we can completely focus, when we're on the road or when we're spending time with our team. I don't know that we knew how to articulate that at the time. It's just kind of who we were. And I think that allowed us to wear a lot of different hats and allowed us to be successful academically and athletically. And we're both very goal oriented, so we wanted to make sure that we were accomplishing our academic goals as well. And Ukari mentioned the resources, even though the resources weren't as vast as they are now, the quality of the resources were tremendous. I mean, Sue Ofterhide was the best. That she kept us alive. I changed majors. I was in aviation for 2 years. I changed to communications after that. I had no idea which direction I wanted to go. Sue helped with that. Our coaches were very accommodating. Our teammates understood as well. So if we had to go late for practice that day and we weren't starting until 7:00 at night, it was just, okay, it's what we're doing. And so I do feel like we had the best of all worlds, at Purdue. And I think the foundation that we laid in terms of our work ethic, our work style, and being a part of a team, but also our expectations of what it meant to be a part of a team and what it meant to be your best every day. That really started at Purdue. And really, I would give the credit to it really started after our freshman year at Purdue, when our narrative was really reframed. Our experience wasn't what we thought it was going to be. Everything kind of changed after that year for us on the basketball floor. And I think it brought us a renewed focus on what we wanted our experience to be. And then that set us up for what we want our lives to be. And those are lessons that we learned while we were at Purdue.
Yeah, and I will say I'm glad that Stephanie changed her major from aviation, because she tried to get me to go fly with her one day, and in one of those, I don't know how small, it's probably like a 2-seater or maybe 3.
Single engine.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
Steph, I love you. You're a great teammate and friend, but no, thank you.
But I'm not doing
I
that.
trust you on the floor, but there's boundaries here. I'm not going up with you. So
with Ukari's background in engineering as a Purdue School of Mechanical Engineering alumna, she shares the story of another Boilermaker engineering alum. And this isn't just any Boilermaker.
It was kind of crazy. So after practice, a lot of times we would go up in the basketball office and either talk to the coaches or talk to the secretaries or the people who are in the office, kind of taking care of the office for everybody. Leah and Dee were the 2 people, I think, at the time that were there, maybe Leah for sure. But so we would have our little slots there with our name on it. And if we got fan mail or whatever, we could grab it. And, when I went up there and, I'm talking and they're like, oh, you got some fan mail. So I grab it. There's a couple letters or whatever. Don't really think anything of it. So I think I got that, went to training table to eat, then went on over to Owen Hall. And I don't even know if I opened it right away, but I started opening some of the mail and I'm like, oh, this is a nice letter from a fan. And then I opened that one and I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm reading it and I'm like, how does Neil Arm? I'm like, there's no way this is real. Like literally who's playing a joke on me, whatever. But, come to find out it was. And it was interesting because, I used to want to be an astronaut. And that's kind of what got me interested in being an engineer because most, or at the time at least, most of the people who are astronauts had gotten engineering degrees. And so I had said this in a newsletter or some kind of newsletter. They were asking us random questions or whatever. And I must have told them, yeah, growing up as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. So he had, in the letter kind of said, hey, I saw the newsletter, I heard, saw where you wanted to be an astronaut. You would love to play basketball on the moon because you could slam dunk with no problem or whatever. So I'm smart enough to have kept that letter. It's framed at my house. But, for me, honestly, it's, one of those things that's like surreal. And, looking back, I wish I had have asked to meet him at the time because I never actually got to meet Mr. Armstrong. But it was something for me that I was like, man, here I am, this sophomore on a team that basically just disintegrated and we're not a big name or anything like that. But here's this, most famous Purdue alum that's taken the time to write a letter to me. And that really was grounding for me. And also is something I think later on you wanted to talk about what sets Purdue apart or why I'm so proud to be a Purdue alum, but it's alums like that and the gestures, the small gestures that people make that really make me proud to be a Boilermaker.
So what happened after these 2 national champions graduated from Purdue in 1999? Well, they both went on to have professional playing careers within the WNBA, and they both coached in the basketball world as well. Stephanie continued her coaching career and is now the head coach of the WNBA's Connecticut Sun. She also just won WNBA's Coach of the Year in 2023. Meanwhile, Ukari has been enjoying her career post-basketball as an engineer for Toyota in her hometown of Georgetown, Kentucky. So what happened after the ball stopped bouncing? And how did their Purdue experiences help set them up for success, both within the WNBA and then later in their careers outside of playing professional basketball?
I don't know that either one of us could have predicted being able to play basketball after college. I know Ukari always wanted to be an engineer. I had no idea. I didn't think I wanted to coach. Coaching never crossed my mind. But I do know that, having the opportunity to continue our career, we might have been sophomores, freshmen or sophomores when the WNBA came into existence. And it was just kind of the next step, right, for us. We were drafted. We were going to go be a part of a team. Playing in the W was different than college. And Kari alluded to it. We had a unique experience as far as being a part of a true team, that felt like family. And when you're a pro, it's not like that. Most places it's not like that. It's your job. And just like most places, you go to your job, you go home. And so that was different for us. Neither one of us had really long careers. And for me, I had a lot of injuries. That ankle that I hurt in the national championship game, I ended up having 3 surgeries on that, and then a number of surgeries as well. I think I had 6 in 3 years. And so it cut my playing career short. And I remember before the last year that I played, Ball State University, the head coach there, Tracy Roller, she had season tickets to the Fever, and I was playing for the Fever. And she came in and she asked me, have you ever thought about coaching? And I was like, not really. She said, well, I have an assistant coaching position, and I wonder if you'd like to take it. And I said, well, I'm not quite ready to finish playing. And she's like, that's all right. Like, we're just up the road, right? So you can coach in the winter and train and then come back and play in the summertime. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I will try that. Maybe just see if I like it. It'll be convenient because I'm still in Indiana. I don't have to worry about moving or anything like that. So I did it. And I remember the first time I stepped foot on the floor, it was like I felt like I was home. I felt like I was home, and I knew that was what I was supposed to do. So it made it a little bit easier for me when it came time to hang it up, because then I went back and I played one more year. I tore my ACL. And so it made it easier for me to say, okay, it's time to move on to the next thing. I don't know that I anticipated my career path would bring me back to the W. At the time I was coaching in college, for a number of years, and then a job in Chicago opened up, and I was asked to make that leap to bring former players back into the league. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working with pros. I really enjoyed trying to be on the forefront of the best basketball in the world, challenging me in a number of ways. And so, it kind of just went from there. During that time in Chicago, I was also very lucky and fortunate because that was when the Big Ten Network started. The head coach that I worked for in Chicago didn't like to do the television interviews. So I would do like our pregame interviews and our halftime interviews and our postgame interviews. And the man who was doing our play-by-play at the time, his name is Eric Collins. He's now the voice of the Charlotte Hornets. But he asked me, he's like, why aren't you working in television? It's like, what do you mean? Like, what would I do in television? I don't know. He said, the Big Ten Network's starting. I want you to call this man. He gave me the name of Tim Sutton and Leon Schweier, who's a Purdue alum. And I called, and they were like, yeah, why don't you come in? We'll try you out. We'll give you a few games. And a few games turned into 50 that first year for me, 50 events between games and studios, because I was living in Chicago. The studio was in Chicago. And, so it gave me this entirely new career path. And so since that year, which I think it was 2008, 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there, it all blends together when you get old. But, since then I've had these 2 careers. And so I changed to communications when I was at Purdue, had no idea what I wanted to do. So I studied general comm, and it led me into 2 professions where communicating is all I do, and finding different ways to communicate and finding different ways to get the message across. And so I'm very thankful for that experience. I felt like, I was never the most athletic player, the most gifted player, the most talented player, but the way that I could see the game and think the game was always my strength. And that naturally transitioned to coaching. I hope that naturally helps when I'm calling games, that gives the viewer a different perspective as well. So, I'm thankful that foundation was laid while I was at Purdue. But, every once in a while, you got to get lucky. And I got lucky when I was in Chicago, and it's led to this.
Lucky and talented would be the one part that she left out there. So I think for me, as Steph mentioned, I never really was thinking about professional basketball while I was at Purdue. And so when the WNBA, there's the ABL, was the Women's Basketball League, the ABL was there. And there were a couple players from Purdue that were playing in the ABL, I think, at the time. But, actually coming out of one of my final exams is when I found out I got drafted with the WNBA. But part of the problem for us, I guess, that year was the ABL had folded. So we got in the draft with all the professional players from that league. And so I got drafted by Los Angeles, and I'm like, well, this is going to be crazy to try to go out. But I got also fortunate as a point guard to get to pass the ball to Lisa Leslie. But, for me, I'm like, well, I'll go out and give it a try. If I don't make it, I'll move forward and use my degree. And so when I, made the team and was able to become one of the starters on the team and get some playing time. But like Steph said, it was kind of one of those things where that team was really talented, probably kind of like our team, our Purdue, our freshman year, super, super talented, but everybody wasn't playing, necessarily together at the time. And so my experience, I think, at Purdue helped me to be able to help facilitate becoming more of a team. And, over that next 3 years, our team really bonded, and not just because obviously of what I did, but Michael Cooper became our coach. And, we had a lot of players that bought into what he was wanting us to do, and was fortunate enough to win the WNBA championship as well in 01. But during the time that I played in the WNBA, during the off season, I actually worked at Caterpillar in Lafayette. And I never had a chance to use my engineering degree because I couldn't co-op. I was usually taking classes during the summer. So I did that during the WNBA off season, and then came back and played. And it kind of was, for me, something that showed me, like, yes, you're pretty good at basketball, but you're also able to be successful in your engineering career as well. And so, I don't know, we won the championship in Los Angeles. And then, like, maybe 2 days before I was supposed to fly back to Los Angeles, I got traded to Portland. And I went and played in Portland for a year. Their team folded. All these things were happening. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just go use my engineering degree. So I went and worked for my mentor in Lexington at a small consulting engineering firm. And then Houston Comets coach Van Chancellor called me and wanted me to try to come back and play. And I'm like, Van, I will play one more year. And after that, I'm done. I'm going to use my engineering degree. And so I came back, and it was one of those opportunities you couldn't turn down, because it's like you get to play with Cheryl Swoops, Cynthia Cooper, Tina Thompson. It's like they had a dynasty in the WNBA, so getting to be that point guard for them. But I knew that year, after that year, or actually during the year, I'm like, you know what? I don't have it. This isn't the same experience that maybe I had at Purdue, or even on that championship team in Los Angeles. Were actually the closest thing to our Purdue team as far as closeness. I still keep in contact with some of those teammates, but I decided to go ahead and leave. And then I came and worked at Toyota in my hometown of Georgetown, Kentucky, as an engineer there. And I've been here a total of 17 years now, but I did take a little bit of a hiatus and tried the coaching thing for 4 years. I came back and coached at Purdue for 2 years, and then at University of Kentucky, I was on their staff for a couple years. But after I had my son, I realized it was a lot more. And I there were a couple of times I called Coach Peck or Carrie Cremines or Pam Stackhouse that were our coaches, and said, man, I didn't realize everything you all did. I think we used to laugh sometimes, and I gave Coach Peck another name. We called her Claudine, for the days that most of the days she would wear her contacts, and she was upbeat, and her hair was fixed and everything. But then there would be days that she would come in with her glasses on. She looked like she was, worn out. Hair might have been a little frizzled or whatever. And so those were the days she was probably out coming back from recruiting, right? Late night recruiting, whatever. So anyway, I got a chance to really see the coaching side, and came back to Toyota. And now I'm an executive at Toyota in my hometown. And it's been a great experience. I think Purdue definitely, and even just the basketball and all the adversity that, Steph and I have talked about that we've gone through. It's like great life lessons through sports. And obviously most people's job and career don't always go right as planned, but you do have to have a plan to at least try to know what you want to try to do. And there's a lot of people, I know for me, that tried to detract me from what I wanted to do. It was like, I've wanted to do engineering, but people have, play a couple more years or go overseas. You can play and make money. And I'm like, yeah, I can make money for 2 or 3 more years. But if I use my degree, I can sustain myself for the rest of my life. Right. So that was kind of the decision making for me. And I've also come back and been able to talk to some of the Purdue students and some of the classes just about engineering and just the different things you can do with engineering. Because honestly, for me, it's like right now with what I do in my day to day, I don't get to do the actual engineering work, but I get to help be the person that, leads and helps mentor and support and hopefully inspire other people who are engineers to continue to grow and develop in the organization.
As you just heard, Stephanie and Ukari have gone on to have incredible careers since winning a national title in college and playing professional basketball. And they've shared so much with us about their journeys since that iconic win. But at the end of the day, why are each of these women proud to be Boilermakers?
First and foremost, I'm proud because we have the only national championship banner in Mackey Arena and one in the Big Ten. So from a basketball standpoint, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the way that we did it. I'm proud of the teams that we had and the people and friendships and family that I've made throughout that process. I don't know that would have been the same experience, and I would have the same lifetime families that I have now. So I'm proud of that. I'm also proud of the community that we have at Purdue. You'll go a lot of places, and I hope that young people are experiencing what we experienced, but I understand it's a different time. But at the same time, you'll go places and you'll have alums that will reach out, they'll reach out and they'll help and they'll communicate. And there's Purdue bars and restaurants in every city, and you can go and people will remember our team, and they'll remember who we were because we were a source of pride for them. So I think for us, for me, the sense of community that we had with our fans at the time, with alumni that we have and continue to have in connection now, and that banner will always be one of the sources of pride for me.
I would say for me, as far as Purdue basketball or women's basketball, and specifically, I would say I'm proud of how the two of us, to be honest, and I know that may be biased for saying proud of us, but proud of, we went in with a mission. We went through a lot, but we stuck with that mission and even helped spread it a little bit throughout the program. And, our program had been built up. They got into a Final Four, I think, the year before we got there. And so the program was there. And then, our freshman year, it kind of came apart. But for us, I think, I'm proud that we stayed. We both had opportunities to leave and go other places. And there are definitely opportunities for us to have separated or not followed the same path, but to stick together and to be able to come out of there, not only with the national championship and with the degrees and the ability to move through our career paths the way we have, but again, developing those skills and that leadership and having all those experiences together, I think, again, is kind of the reason I'm at Stephanie's house or here now, that we still stay in contact. I mean, for me, it's not just proud of what we've accomplished on the court, but the connection off the court, and knowing that when I go through a life experience or have something, whether it's something to laugh about or something to cry about, I've got Stephanie that I can contact, and I know she knows she's got me, and we've got some other people within that group that we can always rely on. And then going back just overall as Purdue, to what I was saying about Neil Armstrong, it's like people like him, who have this tremendous name and notoriety around the world, for him to reach out to a women's basketball player and on a team that, like I said, we hadn't done anything. I mean, I honestly think I maybe played or started 10 games the year before, and most people at the time didn't even know if we were going to have enough players our sophomore year to have a team. So for him to do that, you look at what, like Drew Brees, Coach Peck mentioned Drew. Drew was there during our time, and he knew the importance of the academic center, and for him and Brittany to give back and do what they've done for Purdue, for Brian Cardinal and Danielle Bird or Cardinal to give back. And so it's like, I feel the pride in knowing we have a community of givers and people who, a lot of us may not have been the people that everybody expected to win, or the people, Drew, if you look at Drew's stature compared to other quarterbacks, nobody was expecting him to have the career he did, but he was able to do it, right? And both at Purdue and professionally. So I think for me, it's that sense of pride. And like Steph said, I mean, everywhere I go when I wear Purdue, it's like, in the airport. I think I was in Hawaii one time, and it's funny because people are like, man, you know people everywhere. And I'm like, well, like kind of like Steph said, it's like if people followed Purdue sports at all, we're the national champs, right? And so people will remember us or remember who we are. And so it's pretty cool to go, you know, as you travel the world or travel around, to have those Purdue connections.
And what are their next giant leaps? Here's Ukari.
I think over the past few years, I think I've grown a lot, both personally and professionally. And there's a lot of things that, you know, for me, I grew up in a community, you know, people say I'm from Georgetown, but I grew up in a smaller community called New Zion. That's a, you know, really family oriented area. How I grew up and how my family raised me is to much is given, much is required. And I feel like I've been blessed beyond measure for just where I am in life, the things that I have, and maybe even some of the skill sets or talents that I have. And I'm really passionate and have been motivated to try to use those in other ways to kind of help and benefit other people. So that's probably something this year that I'm putting as a big item for me to kind of move forward. I've had some ideas that are out there, so I don't want to say what they are, but I will be kind of doing some of that giving back that I said the Purdue community as well, I think is probably known for.
And here's Stephanie.
I think that's tough when we're still so trying to accomplish things now, whether it be coaching for me or continuing to climb the ladder from a broadcasting standpoint. But I would say personally, the next great leap is just with my children, you know, and my family. It's okay. I have all boys. I want my boys to be allies. I want them to champion women. I want them to be leaders who are inclusive and who are accepting and who challenge social norms and who think for themselves, who use critical thinking and who challenge ideas. And we've got a lot of yes people in the world. I only want them to say yes when I ask them to clean their room. But I think hopefully raising strong, independent men who are champions for equality. That's what I would love my legacy to be as a parent. And that's something that as my kids have gotten older, that I've started to really take to heart. Like, I'm not going to coach forever. Hopefully, I'm not going to work forever. But the impact and the experiences that my boys get to have because of what I do allows them to be surrounded by strong women, by lots of diversity. And I want them to take those experiences and help make the world a better place. To me, that's my next great leap.
I can't thank you both enough for joining us. It was a blast. I mean, you all were the three friends, but I felt like I was included. So
of course you are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you a fan of Purdue basketball? Need something to help you get your boiler fixed before the next big game? Check out the Boiler Ball podcast to stay in the know and get inside stories all about the Purdue basketball program and beyond. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We can't thank Coach Peck, Stephanie, and Ukari enough for their time. If you want to experience firsthand the camaraderie, friendship, and Boilermaker spirit between these three women, be sure to go to our This Is Purdue YouTube page, youtube.com/@ThisIsPurdue. And be sure to hit that subscribe button while you're there so you never miss an episode. This Is Purdue is hosted and written by me, Kate Young. Our podcast videography for this episode was led by Ted Schellenberger. Our social media marketing is led by Maria Welch. Our podcast distribution strategy is led by Teresa Walker and Carly Eastman. Our podcast photography for this episode is thanks to Purdue Athletics. Our podcast design is led by Caitlin Freeville. Our podcast team project manager is Rain Gu. Our podcast YouTube promotion is managed by Megan Hoskins and Kirsten Bowman. Additional writing assistance is led by Sophie Ritz. Our This Is Purdue intern is Caroline Keim. And special thanks to our team's athletics expert, Tom Schott. Thanks for listening to This Is Purdue. For more information on this episode, visit our website at purdue.edu/podcast. There, you can head over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe and leave us a review. And as always, boiler up.